Good morning and welcome. For 23 years now, the Life and Faith team has been bringing you stories from faith communities throughout southwestern Ontario. Thank you for that, and we're so glad that you're making us part of your day today. First up, Matthew Penny chats with the Reverend Dr. Kate Crawford about the changing directions of ministry. Then we join a special Taizé service held at King's College at the University of Western Ontario. And lastly, it's off to Christ Church Petrolia, where we join Reverend Keith Nethery and Reverend Raymond Hodgson at a recently held workshop on some of the roles lay people play in the participation of worship services. Now let's join Matthew and Kate and hear what they have to say.
I was reading in Touchstone an article by you in here about ministry, and the whole concept of the issue of Touchstone, why bother with ministry, just struck a chord with me. I thought that was wonderful. And you're a person who's been in ministry a while, you help people in ministry, you do stuff in ministry, and you called it being in the trenches. How is ministry doing?
How is ministry doing? That's a really good way to ask your question, Matthew. I think people who are in ministry very soon get through the honeymoon period of, oh, isn't it lovely, I've been ordained, I'm special. And we hit a point in our career where the rubber hits the road. You're either going to be in it for the long haul or you're going to bail and go. There are stresses on clergy now that I don't believe we are well trained for.
Like what?
The theological schools are set up, in my opinion, to educate us along an intellectual and academic level, which we need. I would not want to be in the pastoral charge without the theological training that I have. But which the piece I didn't receive had to do with coping with the decline and fall, shall we say, of the church, not just the United Church of Canada. The whole shooting match is in the process of shifting and changing. Some pieces are falling away and disappearing irrevocably. Other pieces are emerging, but we don't know what they're going to look like. And the core of folk who remain, who I think must be the most dedicated, faithful people in the history of our church, the core of people who remain, in my opinion, are grief-stricken.
Grief-stricken.
Grief-stricken. They inherited this beautiful church. Their parents gave them this flourishing church. And the message was simple. If you volunteer in the Sunday school, if you join the women's groups and the men's groups, if you pour your lifeblood into this church financially, it will grow. And they did all those things, and the church isn't growing.
Well, someone once said to me, a minister in fact, that what they didn't want to do was maintenance ministry. They always wanted to do something new and exciting and alive. But that sounds like you're maintaining, well, you maintain your house, you maintain your car, you maintain your health, hopefully, but you maintain a congregation?
I feel a bit like we're maintaining on the deck of a ship that's pitching and rolling. Maintain in the sense that the ship is sound, but the waters that we're on are choppy. So we cannot do some things at this point in the history of the church. I'm a medieval historian by training, so I take the long view. I don't just look back a few years, I look back 500 years, and I see the church's graceful arc. It rises up out of the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, gently falling into the Enlightenment, rising up again at the turn of the 19th century, coming gently down now. Do I think it's going to go catastrophically down? No, I don't. But I think we're on that pitching and rolling deck. And if we were, as clergy, if we were equipped to understand the stresses that puts under people, I think that we would be happier and more fulfilled in what we're doing than rather going home at the end of the day and saying, man, you know, 2 more people died and no one's coming in the door. I must be failing. That's a terrible message to live with.
Well, that's an awfully common feeling, I think, among clergy people. They don't see, and you're right, they don't get trained how to deal with the turmoil.
Yeah.
They get trained, well, how to preach maybe and how to visit maybe, but not so much how to help people through grief, of the grief around their church.
And how to think theologically about it. How do you become and stay a faithful people when everything you've been told about faithfulness doesn't seem to be true anymore? That's tough. And I think, too, we are not fully understanding the level of guilt and anxiety and fear in our pastoral charges. So the message that everything's fine, we'll just keep doing this and more people will come. If we just buy this new program, more people will come. If we just get the sexy minister from down the street, more people will come. If we just have screens in our worship spaces, you know, it goes on and on like that.
Little fads and trends doesn't work.
Fads and trends, or what appears to be working somewhere else. I think we may not, I may not in my lifetime live within a growing church. So I hope to live within a faithful church, a church that commits itself deeply to Jesus Christ and to discerning His will. If the church is declining, then He must remain with it. How do we find Him? How do we follow Him? What does that mean in this contemporary culture? And how do we find peace within that?
As clergy people, even some of the ones I see fairly new into ministry, have a sense of entitlement that the church will take care of them. And that maybe you don't see that as much, but
I see an awful lot of people coming in as second career, and I think that's the way to do it, boys. If I had a pension from another career, if I had job security from another career, and then got to the point where that could sustain me, and then came into ministry, there's a lot more freedom for that person who's not trying to depend on what the church can provide in their old age. If you've lived in manses your whole life, if you went to university, went straight into theological school and straight out into manses, and you have a passion and commitment for rural ministry, you will retire with no equity in your home.
No, you retire with nothing.
That's right.
And a very small pension.
That's right. And that's not just. It's not right for our institutional church to neglect to see the implications for the personal lives of those who are in service within the church.
Ministry seems to me something that people still want to do and something that's still necessary and can be done very well.
Yeah. It's a job. Is it a job? It's a vocation that has unusual rewards. I cannot think of any other career that I could be involved in which I would be invited into such tender and beautiful intimacy with people at the time of death, at the time of birth, at the time of marriage. I mean, those are the things of life. I am given the privilege of the book that the community treasures and invited to reflect on it, pray over it, and share it. That's just such an astonishing privilege.
It's trust.
Yeah, boy, they do trust me.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the wonderful things that makes people in ministry who are good at it. There are people that are good and people who
sure enough
have struggles, but when they're good at it, they recognize the trust, and it gives them courage and hope. And that's why maybe some of them are willing to tighten their belt, because they know these people trust them and they have a sense of love for the people. And I think you can't be a minister unless you have a strong sense of compassion for the people who you serve.
Love. Compassion is a big piece of it, but I think you have to fall in love with them, and they have to fall in love back. And if that loving relationship can't be formed, that's not going to be a successful pastoral relationship, no matter how red hot you are in the pulpit, and no matter how many books you read on certain subjects. I've had so many people talk to me about Reverend so-and-so who couldn't preach his way out of a paper bag, my dear. It was just appalling. But people loved Reverend so-and-so. Why was that? You come to find Reverend was there when my mother died. Reverend was there when, and they'd list the times of companionship and love, and they endured the sermons and they endured the terrible liturgy because they knew that this person held and cared for and loved and treasured their community the way they did.
Well, it's like what I hear is this minister could bring them the sense of the holy.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. And people need that, because I think people have a strong sense of needing something holy within their souls. And my work with people has said that everyone needs a piece of the holy, and if you're bringing it to them, then it's also bringing them peace and joy and comfort and love, perhaps, hopefully. Then you are the beloved pastor. Someone said to me once, I was doing an oversight visit with a congregation, they said, well, if the people think they're cared for, you can get away with anything.
That's very nice.
Well, no, maybe not anything, but it was that kind of a loving relationship.
Yeah.
one for the other.
Yeah, it's very true. And then getting back to your early question around how do we prepare people adequately for this ministry, how do you teach that? Is that a skill that can be taught, like knitting or sewing or picking up a hammer and banging in nails? This ability to name the holy and surface it and allow it to emerge, coax it out of wherever it is that a skill, or is that just an innate talent that people have?
You mean, is it one of those things, you've got it or you don't?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. My hunch is that it is, that it's not something that a theological professor guiding you and teaching you and imparting wisdom to you can give you. They can give you an appreciation for it. They can help you see it active in others. Can they make it happen in you? No, I don't think so. I think there's a personal transformation that has to take place.
Well, I can only reflect on my own learning to do
Sure
ministry. And getting out, when I was ordained, I was woefully inadequately prepared. I just realized that as time went by.
Yeah.
Not the fault of the school, because they did everything they could to prepare
Sure.
me theologically, education-wise, good place, all that stuff. But it was where the rubber hits the road. How do you do an adequate wedding rehearsal? You should know that before you're ordained. And one of the things the United Church is, and I'd like you to reflect on whether you think this is a good idea or not, they're talking now about mentoring. We have in the United Church the in-ministry program for ordination, where you be a minister for 5 years in a church. You do all the rites and functions with the support of a support group and a mentor and an educational supervisor and all that. And they're also talking about when you're ordained, you get out there, you have someone assigned, like a wise old so-and-so, to be your mentor and your sounding board, so that you're not just adrift on your own.
And I think they're trying to attain that with the field education component and the internship component. I mean, they really are trying to put those pieces in place. The question is, how much is enough? I remember when I was ordained too, and you're put in this tiny little pastoral charge that doesn't look like where you came from, and the people who you are called to love don't look like anyone you've ever met before, and you're sort of, waved goodbye and the door is shut, and there you are. Suddenly that internship seems too short. And your field supervision course, which dragged on interminably, just, you wish you could go back and do it again. I think that having a mentor in those first years in ministry, for my experience, would have been wonderful. I was in a very isolated pastoral charge, and the mentors turned out to be the lay people on the charge who knew far more about what should happen and how it might happen than I did. And they endured an awful lot with me.
Well, I think there's a place in heaven for every pastoral charge that takes a new minister.
Yeah, and takes an intern.
That's right.
It's true, yeah.
Well, this is fun. I appreciate your sharing your time and your thoughts and your wisdom with us. And I look forward to doing this again in the future sometime.
Thank you, Matthew. It was a joy to be here.
Thank you.